Hi everyone, it's Andrew here. Today's tutorial is about moderation in the Stitch discussion forums. Now, if you haven't used the forums very much yet, you probably don't need to watch this video too much, but it's a good primer to get yourself to understand what we're trying to achieve with Stitch. It might be a little bit too long for you, but if you've been using the forums for a while and you understand what it's like to get engaged with people from around the world, around the community, you are going to benefit a lot from understanding some of the new features we've built around communication, around moderation, and particularly what we're expecting from all of our members. Over time, you're going to find that all the things I talk about in this video start to permeate right through the Stitch community. So I'm going to spend a bit of time on why we're doing what we're doing, why it's important, and why if you haven't had any experience with online stuff before, maybe you need to rethink about how Stitch works. So let's get into it, shall we? So before I start, it's worth understanding everything that underpins what we do at Stitch is about how we create a community where the experience for everyone, no matter who you are, is positive. Because let me tell you, there are a gazillion websites out there that if you want to go and pick a fight and have an argument or put someone down and put them in their place, there are plenty of places for you to do that. Stitch has a social mission about enriching the lives of all members. Now that means giving a voice to people who want to be able to talk about their interests, but it also means doing it in a way that makes sure that they don't create a bad experience for other people. Now, the difference between Stitch and other websites is we really care about the outcome here. We are not just about creating a place for the loudest voice or the biggest megaphone or the most opinionated person. It's proven that that sort of stuff creates interest, it creates clicks, it creates traffic, all that sort of stuff. You can go to Facebook, all the algorithms that those guys have, it's all about actually conflict and division because that's what creates attention. Same with news organizations. But guess what? If you're joining Stitch and you're thinking it's about that sort of stuff, then you have to kind of rethink what we're doing. So what we've learned over time with Stitch is we have to think differently about how we create an online platform for engagement that has an outcome that's positive as opposed to negative. Now, when I talk about positive, it doesn't mean let's all talk about happy stuff the whole time. If you're coming to one of my events around widows or widowers or people who are suffering isolation, you'll see there's we're all dealing with a lot of stuff right now. And Stitch is a place for you to talk about those things. They are generally, even though you might be talking about something that's negative in your own life, that's a positive contribution to the community. What we're talking about here are negative contributions in the sense that you're making someone else feel awful. You're putting them down or inadvertently making them feel rubbish. So underpinning all of this is the Stitch community guidelines. Now, this is an evolving document. As we learn about how our community behaves online and in the real world, we're updating the community guidelines all the time. Inside Stitch, you will find links to the guidelines, but if you're ever in doubt, I'll take you over to show you how to find it. So all you need to do is go to support.stitch.net. And you'll see this is our Stitch support page, and you can search for guidelines for the Stitch community, rules and guidelines, and there's a big old document that talks about what we care about and why respect is our number one value, what's unacceptable, and so on. So look, go and read it. It's really detailed. I'm going to cover that in this video. And if you find it boring, that's cool. You don't have to keep on going. All you need to know is that every time you post an online comment in Stitch or you engage with someone through an online message in Stitch, you need to think, could this message be misconstrued as a negative comment, as bullying, as something that's going to bring someone else down? And if it is, maybe I need to think about rewording it. And I'm going to get into how that all works on Stitch and what we're doing to alleviate this. So let's get started, shall we? All right. So the best way to think about how we view moderation on Stitch is there are some behaviors which are flat out prohibited, and that's pretty common. You know, there are a lot of websites that talk about how they don't allow hate speech or, all that sort of stuff. The second part of the way that we interact online on Stitch is about discouraged behavior. Now, these are the things which are not a flat out breach of the guidelines. It's maybe not be hate speech, but it's to do with putting someone else down or making them feel belittled or whatever. And over time, the goal for Stitch is that we can provide enough feedback for people that either they adjust their behavior or they ask to leave. Now, we've got there's a whole sequence in between, whether it's suspension or warnings and all that sort of stuff. I'm going to run you through all of that sort of stuff. But it's really, really worth understanding. We are not trying to do what any other website does. And if you don't like that, if you think that's a violation of free speech or whatever, that's fine. You can go and do whatever you want, wherever you want. But on Stitch, we asked everyone to abide by the rule that you have to treat each other with respect. You don't need to agree with people. You don't need to have the same opinion. In fact, we encourage healthy debate, but it needs to be healthy. That's the whole point. It needs to be respectful, and you need to understand that your ability to articulate your ideas needs to be done in a way that does not make the world threatening or discouraging or miserable for other people. So I've got that off my chest. Let's get into it, shall we? So the first thing to do is let's look at prohibited behavior. So I've created a couple of accounts here. You can see there's this account here, which is my account, and I've created a forum discussion. Now we're focused on forum discussions because that's the only part of Stitch where it only happens online. So this window here is my account. I've created a discussion just for the purpose of the demo to demonstrate the moderation features. I've also created this other account over here, and this account name is Mr. Cranky or Cranky, and Cranky is going to be a little bit of a belligerent participant in my forum, for want of a better word. So if I click over to the forums, Cranky is going to find my demo of features, and Cranky is going to say something. Let's say Cranky says something really, really obnoxious that breaks the guidelines. This is an obnoxious comment. Now you can make up your own mind about what that actually means. So flipping over to my side of things, so here I am, look at my thing, and someone's posted an obnoxious comment in my forum. So let's assume this comment breaches the guidelines, like it's a clear breach of guidelines. It could be a belittling or demeaning, a really obnoxious comment. It could be sexual harassment. It could be hate speech, racism. It could be anything that really crosses the line. We encourage all our members to help through the community, keep the community safe and free from that sort of thing. So you'll see here down on the More menu, you can click Report Comment. And what happens is you get a set of reasons that you can choose for selecting why this is breach of the guidelines. So let's, and the one that I'm going to focus on for now might be this perpetuating or provoking conflict, because actually most of the time what I spend my time on is not clear breaches like sexual harassment, that sort of stuff. It tends not to happen. It's actually these kind of niggles that start as a small argument and they spiral into this big argument between a couple of members that kind of brings everyone else down. So you get to comment on why I think this was terrible. You probably say something a little bit more explicit than that, but anyway, you'll post that. Now, what happens at that point is you can see here, you get a message about it's been submitted to the Stitch team. That message comes through to us, and typically it will be me, but it might be someone from the Stitch team, but looks at the comment to see if it breaches the guidelines. I get to determine, or we get to determine whether it is a breach, in which case the person then gets blocked they get a warning. And depending on the severity, they either get a warning or a suspension, and it escalates from there. Particularly over a period of time, if they get multiple warnings, they will be suspended or expelled from Stitch. Now, of course, if it's a very extreme breach, like say it's a really, really hateful comment, a racist, hateful comment, then they're gone. They're gone immediately. But that doesn't really happen that much. Most of the time, it's people who are not really aware that what they're saying might be seen to be a little bit unacceptable for someone. Anyway, so we get to report whether it is a clear breach of the guidelines, in which case the message goes out to the reporter and the person who made the comment that that's not on. Sometimes it's a valid report, like it was worth reporting, but it actually wasn't really a breach. It might have been negative, in which case we probably should have used outvote, downvote, and I'll get to that in a minute, but it wasn't a clear breach, in which case we'll let you know. We'll say thank you for your report, but it wasn't a clear breach. And if you've got questions about why that's the case, then you can let us know, because sometimes, you know, there's a bit of nuance to there's always nuance to this sort of thing. But if it's deemed to be not a breach, please don't get upset. It just means that we have a set of rules and we apply the rules to our best of our ability as impartially as possible. And if that particular case, it might have been preceded by a whole lot of negative stuff beforehand, but that particular comment does not breach the guidelines, then we will not punish the person who did it. But most of the time when things get reported, it's normally because they've really, really gone too far. Of course, there is a third case. The third case is the person doing the reporting might be doing it for the wrong reasons. They might be abusing the system, reporting people just because they don't like that person. And that's clearly unacceptable. So if that happens, you will get a response from us, and actually you'll be warned, because if that keeps happening, then you'll be suspended from Stitch. So it's really important. This is collective responsibility. We all have a role in making sure the environment is safe and welcoming for everybody. So you don't, be on the lookout for things that are breaching the guidelines, but also don't use it lightly. It's something, it's the moment that you report the comment, you can see here, the comment gets hidden straight away. We trust our members. We're not relying on an army of moderators. There's no moderators. It's our community itself that is there to report things when they see that they cross the line. So please be mindful of that, use it appropriately, and away you go. We've found that we've had a few incidents where people crossed the line, they got the feedback, they went, look, I understand now, I see what it's about. Because remember, if someone's coming from the outside World Wide Web, where anything goes, you know, they can sometimes assume that that's okay here too, and it's not. So it's all about corrective behavior. We want to be as forgiving as possible. If people are willing to adjust and change, then they're great. They're welcome. We don't hold grudges or anything like that. It's all about giving feedback. And if they are willing to adapt, then they're fine. It's only if they're not, that's a problem. Okay, so let's now talk about a much more difficult, and this is a new feature we've only just released. So this is the main reason why I'm sure some people are going to be watching this video. And I'm going to talk about comments which may not break the guidelines, but they are either discouraged or they're encouraged. Let's talk about the discouraging things first. So you might think, why are we putting this effort into making sure people treat each other with respect? Why are we putting effort into governing behavior online? What you might not realize is I get to see the impact of all of those things. The actual toll on people when they feel like they're being bullied or ostracized or excluded or those sorts of things, it actually can really, really have a big impact on them. I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's think about Mr. Cranky over here. Mr. Cranky, he's having a tough day and he's really annoyed with everyone, who knows what. He jumps into a bunch of conversations and he's kind of dismissive of everyone. You are all idiots and don't know what you're talking about. In fact, these conversations are so boring, you'll never see me here again. Thanks, Mr. Cranky. Now, let's have a look at this. Mr. Cranky has just posted something which it's not really a breach of the guidelines. It's not severe enough to say, well, you need to be punished or suspended for that sort of thing. You know, it's just not that positive. But Mr. Cranky does this again and again and again and again. and vanishes for a while, drops back in again. And over time, it just kind of brings people down. After a while, those small number of individuals mean that people are really scared to join. Might just say, that's a stupid thing. In response to a comment, that's a stupid thing to say. There you go. He's cranking off again. So this is why we introduced the idea of downvoting. Now, in most websites, an upvote or a downvote actually are more to do with, I agree with you or not. And we learned that actually that's not what they need to be for Stitch. What we're focused on is how do we create the right behavior and how do you engage in a way, and you might have forgotten this, but it used to be that we'd engage respectfully around difference of opinions, whether it's political or whatever, and it doesn't happen anymore. Guess what? It's because of the internet. So recently we've rolled out our new focus on upvoting and downvoting. Let's look at downvoting because actually that's where the most corrective behavior comes in. When I downvote someone, I can now, so we force you to choose what your reason is for downvoting, and you can choose to disagree if you want. Now, if you choose to disagree, we encourage you to actually, a better way to disagree rather than just downvoting them is to send them a message. You can do it privately. You can engage respectfully in the communication, in the conversation, that's fine. But if you think the person is actually behaving in a way, and we've listed out a bunch of behaviors that we want to discourage on Stitch, if they're behaving in a way that is one of the things we want to discourage, you can downvote it for that reason. So, they might be being domineering or disrespectful or being passive aggressive. The people who say, I'm leaving, or things like that, it's kind of just unpleasant, but it's a little bit of a niggle. So let's just say they're being disrespectful to you. Now, on its own, that one vote doesn't make a difference. It's the collective action of those votes that builds up. So at the moment, we're doing this ourselves because I run through a weekly report to make sure that the reports are being used the right way. The last thing we want to do is open the door for abuse. So someone who doesn't like Mr. Cranky and goes around downvoting everyone's and Mr. Cranky's votes. That's not allowed anymore. In fact, the reports that we now run allow us to see those patterns and then contact the person who's using them for the wrong reasons, let them know they've been detected, and also if they keep on doing it, then they're out of Stitch as well. This is about making sure we have enough corrective action to let Mr. Cranky know. So if Mr. Cranky gets voted down in enough votes by a range of people, it's a pretty good symbol or signal to us that Mr. Cranky needs to be told to change his behavior, or he won't be welcome on Stitch for a short amount of time and maybe a longer amount of time. So we're taking downvotes very seriously, and they have a very different role than just an upvote, a thumbs up or a thumbs down on Facebook. This is about maintaining positive, supportive behavior in the community. So be very careful. You cannot vote people down. Expect you're going to be reviewed if you vote someone down. That's just going to happen. And if there's patterns where you're forming cliques or clubs to downvote people en masse, we detect that. It's actually pretty simple from a software perspective to see where there are groups of people doing the same thing over and over again. It's about making sure that comments are downvoted correctly. And once we're sure it's being used the right way, Mr. Cranky will get a nudge in the right direction immediately. At the moment, there'll be a bit of a delay, but immediately Mr. Cranky will say, hey, you know what, Mr. Cranky, that's actually not really welcome on Stitch. And if you keep on doing it, you really want to change the way you behave. Most of the time, when we give some feedback to our members and we do it the right way, particularly if it comes from Stitch rather than other members, they change their behavior. So this is our way of saying, take on board the feedback. Now, if Mr. Cranky says, oh, I've taken that feedback, I am really sorry for how that came across. Please accept my sincerest apology. Well, so sometimes someone like Mr. Cranky might say something that you actually want to recognize as being good as well. And so this is where the upvote comments come in. Now again, You can say, I agree with the comment, I support the comment. That won't necessarily, we don't use that for our metrics or our tracking to see how people are behaving. But we recommend that if you do choose to agree with a comment, you send them a message. So say someone has a particular stance on some social issue or political issue or climate change or whatever it happens to be, and you support them, then send them a message. That's cool. That's great. Or post a comment, in the community itself. But you've got to make sure it's positive and in line with the community standards. But you can also note that this person is being kind, respectful, welcoming. Good moderation is very, very welcomed because, sometimes it just takes someone to say, hey, guys, let's step in and make sure we're doing things the right way. I'm just going to remind you of things. So it needs to be good moderation. Away you go. So I might decide to say this comment from Mr. Cranky is respectful, and bang, he gets an upvote. Got to remember, people can change. There's so many members in the community who might make a few mistakes when they first engage with people, or they've ruffled your feathers. That's why I had a picture of the seagull. But they do change. They do change. And giving that feedback is really, really key. So the last thing to really focus on is the other thing that we see again and again is that someone who thinks they're doing the right thing when they see a bad comment. So Mr. Cranky again, he's back to his old tricks, says something like, I hate everyone from country X. I don't know where country X is, but let's say every country X. They are all idiots or whatever it happens to be. Now you might see this and you might go, that's ridiculous. You should apologize. I'll do it this time. That's ridiculous. You should apologize. In fact, I'm going to say go for it further. You should be ashamed of yourself for such a comment. Now, let's take a look at this. This itself doesn't cross most guidelines. It's not completely demeaning, but it crosses it breaches the guidelines in one particular important rule, and that is the perpetuation of conflict, the creation, perpetuation, or provoking of conflict. When you see something that is bad, in your opinion, you have to resist the temptation to engage with it, because over the years, the one thing we've learned is that's what creates the conflict. It's not the first comment that creates the conflict. It's the reaction to the comment that creates the conflict. Use the moderation tools. Downvote the comment if it's only a mild thing. Report the comment if it's a clear breach. Apart from that, ignore the comment. Let Stitch deal with the feedback. Let Stitch deal with blocking people. Let Stitch deal with all that sort of stuff, because if the system's working well, it's a much better response. And actually, it's much better to come from a impartial third party than from someone in the forums, because that's what creates conflict. Okay, that's a long tutorial. And normally a tutorial is really quick. It's like, use this, click this button, do this. The reason this was long is there's a lot behind the scenes here about social dynamics, about how people interact, about how online interaction is different from real world, about misconceptions, people thinking that other people are out to get them. Like, there's all sorts of weird stuff that happens when you're just dealing with stuff online. I would encourage you all, engage in the forums as much as you can, but also from time to time, get engaged in the other parts of Stitch too. See that the other people you're dealing with are real people, and actually they're very interesting and they're nuanced, and there's so much depth to all of our members. You don't always see that in the forums. So bear that in mind whenever you're doing anything. Remember, we're all here for the same reasons. And if you're not here for the right reasons, then pretty soon the community will see you to the door. But actually, most members are here for the right reasons, and we want to make it a great experience for everybody. Healthy debate, healthy arguments, fine, but you need to know the difference between healthy and unhealthy. You need to be able to be aware of what the community guidelines are, and if you cross them, you'll get the feedback and you'll learn. So thanks for everything. Thanks for listening, and I'm looking forward to seeing how things get used. And give us any of the feedback you've got. If you're not following, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can always scroll down and subscribe to the channel because we've got a bunch of tutorials coming up, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.